Hello everyone, today is May the 1st and even though I haven't finished a book yet, I want to start my reading vlog because I'm wearing the most gorgeous dress that I just have to show you. Actually, let me just put you up here and see if that works. Here's the dress, can you see it? I love it. I basically watched La La Land some weeks ago, and since I watched that movie, I knew that I had to get myself a yellow dress. So here we are. I'm basically checking my YouTube subscribers any minute these days just because I'm so close to reaching 10,000 subscribers, which is crazy, really crazy. Let's just try and check now and see. Normally I wouldn't check it that much, but since I'm so close, I find myself checking it quite a lot these days. I am currently 17 subscribers from reaching 10k and it's insane. I'm so thankful, and obviously I do plan on doing a video about this at some point this month. Come to think of it, that video will most probably be up by the time you watch this reading vlog. I was supposed to film in a room with better lighting, but I'm currently sat here with my Zeus, who doesn't want to move. Thank you, Zeus. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the first book I have finished this month with, which is This Beauty, The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon. It's hard to describe this book because it's partly a whodunit story, it's partly a coming of age story, and basically it's about these two girls, Grace and Tilly, who we meet during one of Britain's hottest summers back in 1970s, and the story takes off on a day in which a woman on their street goes missing. So of course the neighborhood starts questioning what has happened to her, is she ever going to come back? And we quickly realize that a lot of the people on the street have some secrets that they don't want to have revealed. And of course our two little girls decide to go on a quest to find out what has happened. This book is about so many things. I loved it for its finesse for symbolism and religion, and I loved the coming of age parts. It's got a lot of humor in it. I was entertained, and because I don't really like the crime genre, I decided to give this book 4.5 out of 5 stars, but definitely worth a read. Also, I need to mention that when I was this far into the book, I reached 10,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, so I decided to make an earmark, even though I hate doing that, but just to commemorate this day and remember exactly which book I was reading and which page I was reading when that happened. So thank you so much to everyone for helping me reach 10,000 subscribers. It's insane. This book was just as good as I was hoping for. The Unseen World by Liz Moore, which is about Ada and her father who are living together. Ada is about 14 years old and her connection to her father is her everything. So it's very troubling to her when she realizes that her father starts forgetting ordinary things. That's the plot. The story is so good. I found myself very captivated with it whenever I read it. It's one of those stories that I will think back on and remember fondly because it made me feel good while I read it, while it was also very disturbing because it turns out that her father has some secrets that she didn't know of and that are now being revealed. So yeah, this book was as good as I was hoping for, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, hands down. Here is my newest acquisition to my apartment. This is actually a photo that I heard about through a book that I read last year, a non-fiction book about loneliness and feeling lonely while you are surrounded by people. This one, The Lonely City by Olivia Lang. This one touches on the subject of loneliness, and it has references to that exact picture, and since then the picture has been stuck in my head, so I finally decided to get it. When I started reading The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which looks like this, I got about 2 chapters in and I was so disappointed because those 2 chapters were filled with cliches about black people, and I didn't really like it. However, luckily I decided to continue reading, and I actually ended up really liking this novel, which is a young adult book about racism and the problematics of being a black person in America. It's about Star Carter, who is a black girl living in a black neighborhood, and in chapter 2 her best friend gets shot by the police. So as you can hear, it deals with a lot of relevant topics of today's world. I think it's an important piece of work, and as I said, I'm glad I ended up reading it. I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. I have read Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien, and I was not a fan. This book is about the Chinese Revolution of the 1960s, and it's about our main character who lives in Canada, but whose father was part of this revolution and actually committed suicide because of that. I found the writing style very unappealing. This is a 500-page book, and having now finished it, I don't feel like I got that much out of it. It also comes with a very intricate storyline and a lot of characters. It's hard to keep track of them, and I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't invested in any of the characters, so I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. But you shouldn't take my word for it, because a lot of people love it. I just unfortunately didn't. This book was wonderful. It was just up my alley. Imagine being married and not being able to have children, and then imagine your husband getting another wife in order to have children. That's what this book is about, and even though it's a short novel, it has so many twists and turns, which I adored. I absolutely love this book, and obviously I gave it 5 stars. I don't know whether to be disturbed or not by myself, because I actually love this book, The Lonely Hearts Hotel by Heather O'Neill. This book is so cruel. It is about this couple who are orphans and an orphanage. They know each other and they fall in love with each other, but they are separated. This book is so abhorrent. It's about drugs, it's about rape, it's about abuse, but still it's so beautiful, and in my eyes right now it's a 5-star novel for sure. I might change my opinion just because you really have to know that this is an abhorrent story, and you have to be in that frame of mind and be accepting of that. I loved it, and I might change my rating, but for now it is a 5-star read. I'm sitting here with Dragon Springs Road by Jenny Chang, which is a story set in China in the 20th century. It's about this main character who is a very young girl when we meet her in the beginning, and she is also a Eurasian, which means that she is part European and part Asian, and you wouldn't think that matters that much, but back in the beginning of the 20th century, that was a huge problem to Chinese people. So this girl grows up and has a hard time being accepted in her society. This book was mediocre. It was okay, but it follows a very linear storyline, which tended to become kind of boring in some places, but I did enjoy it. I did like reading about our main character and her destiny, so I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I have realized that I love books taking place in Nigeria or in any African country in general. Earlier this month I read Stay With Me, which I loved. I also really love Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's books, and then I have read this one, which also takes place in Nigeria, and I loved it. There is something about the continent of Africa which I find extremely fascinating. But anyway, let's get back to this book. This is Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Okparanda, and it's about our main character who is attracted to women. However, she lives in 1970s Nigeria, and her mother does not want for her daughter to end up with women. She wants for her daughter to have a normal life and marry a man. So our main character has to live according to her mother's wishes, which I found extremely heartbreaking. It's very clear that our main character suffers under these conditions because she cannot love whomever she wants to love. So this book is definitely very relevant in our world today. It's very important, and it's beautifully written. I like how it was divided into different parts with different foci, so that it's also about her father dying during the Nigerian civil war, and it's also about her being placed with another family. Anyway, I think I could ramble on. I love this book and I gave it 5 stars. I have received a book from the only publisher that I accept review copies from, which is very exciting. I also got some, I don't know what this is, candy maybe? I will have to see. So this book I'm pretty sure is going to be absolutely stunning to look at. But let's see. So this is from the Danish publisher L&R that I work together with sometimes. Wow. Wow, I mean, this is a hardback copy and it is absolutely stunning. So as far as I remember, this is about a restaurant and some intrigues going on at a restaurant. I'm not sure, but Zeus, doesn't this look absolutely amazing? I have about half an hour until I have to go to work, and I'm wondering, do I have time to film a video? Maybe, but what I'm here to talk about right now is the next book I have finished, which is considered a classic, I believe. Yes, it is. I don't know why I doubted myself. I finished it this morning in bed. This is How Queen Was My Valley by Richard Llewellyn, which takes place in Wales, and it's from 1939. That's when it was published. I didn't know too much about this book, but I did know that it would be about nostalgia, and it was. It's basically an account of our main character's life. He is now an elder man, but he reflects back on his childhood, and it's funny because whenever you do that, you seem to remember all of the good things and make them even brighter. That's exactly what he does, because even though some brutal things do shine through, it's mostly about good and happy things taking place during his childhood. I really liked it. I gave it 4.5 stars because I think it's a universal book, meaning that this book relates to everyone. All of us can relate to remembering things fondly, and I also think it comes with amazing anecdotes, so hence my rating. I also quickly want to mention that after having finished this book, I've decided to down my rating to 4 stars. It's still a really good book, but after having reconsidered, I think it's more of a 4-star book for me. Now I'm just about to head out, but I have to show you a book I have borrowed from my mother, and it looks like this. Now, I'm sure you've heard of this one, Confess by Colin Hoover, but I'm also sure that you haven't seen it in this condition. I gave this for her on Christmas, last Christmas, and she has read it and loved it, as you can see. So I guess this is just an example of how much you can love books. But I will say that whenever I read and love my books, they don't come like this afterwards. Since I last spoke to you, I have finished 2 books, the first one being a fail, and that is Another Brooklyn by Jacqueline Woodson. I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. It's a book about 4 friends growing up in Brooklyn, and it's predominantly about our main character, whose family has decided to move to Brooklyn because her mother starts hearing voices. But this is a perfect example of a novel that is simply too short. I felt like I couldn't connect with the characters. The chapters were too short, the paragraphs were only of a few sentences, and it was way too fragmented and chaotic for my taste, so not really a book for me. But the other book I read was better, and that is Sweet Bitter by Stephanie Dander, the book I was sent for review. And this one was about this restaurant, a woman who moves to New York and get a job here. And it's also about the hierarchy of the restaurant, and it's about the backstage life of this working place. And as you can see from the cover, it's not a pretty romantic job to have. I like this book. I think it was a pretty decent debut novel, and I liked reading about this world of food and wines and bars and all these things, guests and stress and pressure. I liked it. I did feel like the main character did make some pretty bad choices overall, so that was a bit of a letdown. and I also felt like the story needed a little bit more of a plot. But besides from that, I really enjoyed myself reading it, and I gave this one 3 stars. I have read so many books this month that it's ridiculous, but I have finished yet another one, and this one is based on Russian fairy tales. The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. I love this book. I was fascinated right from the beginning with the Russian setting. I just wished that I had read this book while it was winter outside and cold, and I could have sat inside with the fireplace and a mug of hot chocolate. That would have been perfect for this novel. However, I didn't, but I was still able to really enjoy it. It's based on Russian fairy tales, and if you're not too familiar with those, then luckily this book gives you the fairy tale that everything is based upon in the very first chapter. So that was really good. The rest of the story was really interesting and fascinating and a lot of things. I was a fan and I gave this book 4 stars. This just arrived, so as you can guess, I have a new book haul coming up for you in June. So this next book that I have read is so unique and such a refreshing take on how to tell a story that I don't really know how to explain it. But the book I'm talking about is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. For some of this book, I was utterly confused, but then later on I realized what was going on. It is a very complex story about Lincoln, whose son died when he was a small boy because of an illness. According to history, Lincoln visited the grave of his son at least twice afterwards, and this book is based on that event. I am left speechless. I really don't know how to explain it. This book was phenomenal and it made me feel things that I didn't know I could feel through a book. Or I did know it, but it's just been a long time since I last felt them. It was amazing, a really unique reading experience, and for that alone I love it, but also for the rest of it I just simply adore it. So I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely a book that is now stuck in my mind. I have here Confess by Colleen Hoover, the book that I borrowed from my mother. And I really like Colleen Hoover. If you have read her books, you know what they're all about. This one is no exception. It's a love story told from different perspectives, and it also contains a lot of twists and turns. And Colleen Hoover is brilliant at writing these kinds of stories. I will say that I have started wondering whether she's capable of actually writing other kinds of stories. But that being said, this one was a pleasure to read and I gave it 4 stars.